All right, I want to talk to you now about the Missouri Compromise. We'll start with some historical context, then tell you what the compromise was, and then conclude by telling you why it was historically significant. So, some context prior to the Compromise of 1820, or the Missouri Compromise. These are things you need to remember. First of all, the United States had acquired a huge amount of territory from the French in the Louisiana Purchase that almost doubled the size of the United States and kind of fulfilled this dream of America, that you could move west and settle and acquire territory. Second, the War of 1812. The British had been kicked out of North America. There had been some finality to the Revolutionary War. Our second war for independence in 1812 resulted in more freedom and autonomy for the American states. Third, political parties. The first political party system had ended, and the country was kind of reshaping itself, and political parties were beginning to now form around what are called sectional interests. It seemed as though the southern states and the northern states had different agendas, and we talked a little bit about this earlier in the chapter. The West was also developing with its own unique identity. So we're starting to see sectional politics. That sets up the Missouri Compromise of 1820. So remember that context. So what is it? Well, the Missouri Compromise is the admission of two states, one Missouri and the other Maine. Now you might wonder, Maine's over there with the original 13 colonies. Maine had been part of Massachusetts, but Maine did not feel, the people who lived in Maine did not feel as though they were being represented well by Massachusetts, so they petitioned to become their own state. This is going to be a bargaining chip in the admission of Missouri into the Union as a state, because that sectional balance, remember we mentioned those sectional party interests. One of the things that was really important to the southern region and the northern region was that they had the same number of states, therefore they would have the same number of senators from their region in the United States Senate. So if Missouri was going to come in as a slave state, and that's what Missouri wanted to do, then allowing Maine to be its own state would give the northern interests 2 more votes in the Senate. So that was one important part of this Compromise of 1820. The second piece is the compromisers, and this was led by Henry Clay. The compromisers decided, let's just settle the slavery question now for the rest of the Louisiana Purchase territory. And so they did. They drew a line at the bottom of Missouri, and they said anything above this line that's part of U.S. territory, and this is this greenish color here, this unorganized U.S. territory, would be off limits to slavery, kind of continuing the trend of northern free states. They said this lower part of the Louisiana Purchase would be open to slavery. They drew the line there. It might seem like the slave states got the raw end of the deal here. Why would they be willing to do this? Well, first of all, it was really hard to advocate for the expansion of slavery. There's a lot of energy against slavery. Second of all, they already got Missouri, which was organized into a state. So most of the population is here. They're getting that as a slave state. And they get what they see as the most beneficial and likely cotton producing territory, which is this Arkansas territory here. So this seemed like a good deal to the slave owning South, and it seemed like a good deal to the to the free states of the North. Now, obviously nobody asked slaves, right? Obviously this is a terrible deal. Any deal that continues to support the institution of slavery is going to be a terrible deal for slaves. Okay, but that's the Compromise of 1820. Why is this significant? Well, this line really hardens that line between North and South. We've now literally drawn a line between free and slave. This is also going to set a precedent for future territorial acquisitions, right? And you can see all this territory here that is listed as a Spanish possession will soon become Mexico. And shortly after it becomes Mexico, the United States will take control of this territory and make it part of the United States. And then we're going to have this argument all over again about slavery. But this time, most of it is what the southern states see as potentially good cotton producing land. And so there's going to be a bigger push to make more of this slave state, right? And we'll get to that when we get to ultimately the Compromise of 1850. And we'll see that that compromise really is setting the stage for the Civil War. So we look at the Compromise of 1820 and we see it settled the issue at the time for 30, 40 years, but it's really not answering the slavery question in a meaningful way, thus kind of preparing the ground for a future civil war. Okay, so that's the context, that's the compromise, and that's the significance. Okay, all right, thanks for watching.